But will Texas run the SEC? Okay. They ain't even playing a game.
That is a great, SEC Media Day topic.
Fantastic SEC media. Will Texas run the SEC? First off, on the field, didn't run the Big 12. Oklahoma did. But hey, we know Texas, no, the potential knows no bounds. They could join the NFL and they'd say we're going to run the NFL. They're like the Cowboys, right? It's the same people. Texas fans, Cowboys run the NFL. They ain't done in 40 years.
Yeah.
But other than that, can Texas run the SEC? Let's start with that one. Pat, your thoughts. Ross, your thoughts.
Yeah, according to Nick Saban, they ain't running this conference, as he said on SEC Network. That was I think that was the most viral kind of clip. Saban met with us one-on-one, which I know we're going to talk about a little later. One of the things he said was, I don't want to be controversial. And that was certainly one of his viral kind of controversial type of statements over media days. When we talked about my trip to Austin, right, when they had the welcome party, and that was a part of the story, is that Texas coming into the SEC, how will they handle being in meetings, right, where they're not by far, as far as resources, right, and all that stuff, they're Texas A&M, Alabama, maybe even Georgia, even LSU. I mean, they're all right there clustered up, and you didn't have that, right, in the Big 12. Texas was distant, so much distance resource-wise between them and everybody else, even though, as Pat mentioned, it didn't necessarily help them at times on the field. But in the meeting room, for legislative issues and policy issues, they did get their way in a lot of times. And I think something like Horns Down, right, is a good example of that. That's not happening in the SEC. I think that's been made clear by everybody. The distance between Texas and the other top schools in the league is definitely not what it was in the Big 12.
Until they earn it, they're all hat, no cattle, despite the horns on the side of the helmet. And they may earn it. They may prove themselves quickly. They're certainly going to win SEC championships in sports, multiple sports, right away. But football, where it matters most, they definitely still have some earning and some proving to do. Going in and winning in Tuscaloosa last year was huge. Going to the playoff was huge. But it's a whole different backyard now. And yes, the SEC, as we've said before, is kind of as cutthroat as it is. They're kind of view each other largely, I think, as equals and compatriots. And they will try to gouge each other's eyes out, but they will also close ranks around the conference as a whole. And I don't think they would take kindly at all to having somebody, especially a newcomer, come in and say, well, this is the way we need it. So, let's legislate things this way for our benefit. So that is not going to happen unless or until Texas can prove that it can walk in and dominate the SEC, which I don't expect, because nobody really, even Alabama had certainly dominated, but even then, LSU won some national titles. Auburn was in the championship game. Georgia won back-to-back. So there's enough broad power, influence, and success to make it so that nobody is the one and only big dog.
So that leads to the second question that I heard come out, and then we kind of wrap it back into the other one, was Kirby going to be the next Saban? Saban's retired, and now it's Kirby is the new Saban. Now, Kirby Smart, still a young man, has won 2 national titles. The program is absolutely rolling and all of that. However, let's not minimize what Nick Saban was able to pull off. 7 national titles, all in the SEC, 1 at LSU, 6 at Alabama, but year in, year out, just utter dominance inside the league. I think he was 116-14 inside SEC play after discounting his first year. After his first year, 116-14. All these SEC, he was able to maintain it for a very, very long time. So I discussed this on the Kings of the North podcast with Doug Leon Murray, and we were talking about this. And could this even be possible anymore, considering it's the new era of college football? As great as Saban was, and look, if Saban's 56 right now, maybe he could pull it off. But we're talking about a salary. We're talking about NIL. We're talking about transfer portal. We're talking about Oklahoma and Texas now in the league. We're talking about an expanded playoff where you don't have to be perfect to get in the playoff, and you don't need to be perfect the entire year to win the national championship. I think one of the things Saban was great at is he, first off, loaded up on so many recruits that on day one, that program was operating near maximum capacity, and hence you can go 13-1 or something like that. Nowadays, you don't need to do that. You can drop a couple games, still make a playoff, and get going. I've used this example, I think, here, but I use it elsewhere. This Michigan team this year, right? Top 5 defense, loaded on defense. Great defense. Who the heck's the quarterback? We don't know. Alex Orji. Is he any good? We don't know. Well, maybe he doesn't have to be great on day one. If they can win enough games and get in the playoff, he needs to be great on December 14th. If your offense grows, if your quarterback grows and you survive enough to get in the playoff, you might have the best team by December. You don't have to be the best team for 4 or 5 straight months. That was how Alabama did it. That's how Saban did it. Maybe he could do this too. I'm not saying that not. But there's so many more variables. How could anyone be Saban? And how could anyone run the SEC when the definition of success is no longer, do you have the perfect formula to get so many great players that you never waver the way Saban had? Does that make sense, Pat?
Yeah, it does. And you don't have to be Saban to win big anymore, and you don't have to win every game to have successful seasons.
And you can't
to
win
have
them
a chance to play for it. Yeah, right.
Probably.
I think, yeah. And, your point about a lot of programs, not all of them, but a lot of them will have opportunities to grow into a season and peak at a later point, as opposed to, we've got to be great every single Saturday. And we saw Michigan last year had the luxury of rotating coaches. The year before, they were rotating quarterbacks at the beginning of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. Heck, look, is it possible that Ohio State plays multiple guys in those first 3 games at quarterback, trying to figure out, we'll decide on somebody when we need to. But even then, you could go to Oregon and lose in October if you're Ohio State, and you're okay. You're all right there. So no, there probably won't be another Saban. I'm not sure whether there will be a program that can dominate for the long haul. Kirby is absolutely positioned for it, and I think has the mentality for it, and the consistency of focus and recruiting effort and those sorts of things. But it is just a different formula for what it takes to build, sustain, and go after championships. There's no doubt about it. Now you'll see it in actual practice. That's one of the great things about this 12-team tournament that we're coming up to, is nobody knows what the full effect is going to be, or how to manage the season perfectly, or what it's going to take to win a championship in the new era. So you combine revenue sharing, you combine an expanded playoff, you combine the current free agency of players, and I think we're still in a very much an adaptive phase here to see who's going to figure this out and what it's going to look like.